Unemployment, according to J.F. Kennedy, is a serious threat to any nation's ambition. This is because labor is an active ingredient for the industrialization of the economy. I am Sharon Ijaso and welcome to Labor Lens. On this week's episode of the program, we will be discussing all about youth unemployment, the challenges and the possible solutions. We will be right back. Members of the National Union of Air Transport Workers staged a protest in Lagos, southwest Nigeria, demanding recall of some workers sacked by New Rest ASL. After waiting for the management of the company to address them to no avail, the union leaders took to the streets and the departure terminal of the Muritala Muhammad International Airport, Lagos, to vent their anger. The workers want the management of New Rest ASL to recall the sacked workers at the company and ensure that members are unionized appropriately.
Any worker that wishes to go to NUPSI, let them go. Why is the management having the interest of ensuring that it's only one union that is on ground? It's because of unwholesome practices they have been doing here. It's because they have been robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's because they don't want these people to have a voice. It's because they know that these people, they want their freedom. They have been holding them like slaves in their country. And we say no to modern day slavery.
They have to recall, in compliance with that same judgment, they have to recall all the 6 members of the Executive Council of the branch of ASL of Nuate who have been unlawfully locked out of work for the past 1.5 years, despite the ruling by the National Industrial Court that they should revert them back to their positions. Because there can be no victimization of an employee on account of being a member of or holding office in a trade union.
It will continue. If they don't address the issue, we are going to close all ASL nationwide. And we will ask other unions in other stations, whether ASL is there or not, we'll close it down. We want the government and the management of NAMA, NCAA, FAN to prevail on them that we don't do this type of thing in aviation community.
Though authorities of the Muritala Muhammad International Airport tried to intervene, they declined to speak on camera. They, however, assured the protesting workers that activities of New Rest ASL services will be suspended at the airport. Sharon Ijaso, TVC News, Lagos. Africa's most populous country and largest economy, Nigeria, has been battling youth unemployment problem for years. Nearly a quarter of the population is out of work and 20% is underemployed. For young people aged 15 to 35, the figure is grim, as 55.4% of them are without work. Creating jobs was one of the key issues that dominated this year's election campaign, but has government been able to fulfill its promises to the youths? In the quest to find answers to this nagging question, I met with Abimbola Ajayi. She tells me she is a chemical engineering graduate from the Federal University of Technology, Owerri, in Imo State, southeast Nigeria.
I've applied several advertisements online. I've applied severally, and I've not gotten.
A person is said to be unemployed when such is unable to find a job, even when he is actively searching for one and is capable and willing. According to research, Nigeria needs to be industrialized to check this trend. Lack of this is said to be responsible for the vicious cycle of poverty in the country in terms of low-level industrialization, low turnout of graduates competent in science and technology, low manpower development, poor income and low-level investment.
Or is there still more of a tendency to say,
at a workshop in Lagos, southwest Nigeria, tagged Africa Talent Hunt, some human resource managers shared their experience about recruiting people.
So I think the issue with with Africa is don't rely on the traditional corporates, the financial services companies, the oil and gas companies, the FMCGs, because opportunity is restricted there. They are always going to be looking to drive efficiencies, and driving efficiency to an extent means more automation and fewer people. So the opportunities for growth from a talent point of view are basically going to be outside of your traditional corporates.
First thing is to always make sure you have a profile. All right, so right now in 2019, there's so many different ways that people can find out about your skills, your experiences, and your capabilities. And the best way for that to happen is through a digital profile. So it's extremely important that you create profiles on the platforms that HR executives are actually looking to find people. So this can be on Jobberman, for example, which is a career services platform. You create a profile on there, put your skills, your experiences, your desires, and it's easy for people to actually search for that capability and that experience and find you.
After working for 4 years as a contract staff in one of Nigeria's commercial banks, Abimbola Ajayi is thinking of becoming an entrepreneur. But there are challenges.
What I want to go into needs clean water, very clean water. And if I don't have source of good water, I don't think I'll be able to do the standard. I keep the standard of what I want to produce. So if the government could just help in other ways, infrastructure, basic amenities, then I think people there'll be more entrepreneurs.
Unemployment became a source of worry in the country after the Nigeria Civil War in 1970. The problem became more pronounced with the introduction of Structural Adjustment Program (SAP), which advocated the removal of government subsidies, rationalization of government expenditure, as well as privatization of the public sector of the economy. For Abimbola Ajayi and other unemployed youth, they hope there will be reliable database to help strengthen government policies to tackle unemployment. Many economists and social commentators are of the view that the pitfall of unemployment can be blamed for crimes and rising insecurity in the country. The current government is tackling the rising unemployment rate in the country with interventionist social investment programs like the N-Power and Trade and Money, but is still a long way out of the unemployment woes in Nigeria.
There are a lot of examples in Leamington. Get a lot of CVs, and we get a lot of information from LinkedIn especially, and by the time you get to talk to these individuals and you ask them the real questions and you get to see that, okay, this is not really what we wanted, then we now need to go back again to start to search for people all over again, which takes a lot of time in getting people. So those are the kind of challenges that we face.
My experience in HR, I think people need to upskill. Now, sometimes I get a lot of, the organization doesn't train me, but I think you need to get out of your comfort zone and train yourself. There are a lot of certifications, a lot of, we're going digital. I think young people should look for where they can get this training, develop themselves, prepare themselves. You never know. Find out what's the trend.
It's not as if there aren't jobs in the market. In fact, sometimes you spend so much time and so much resources trying to fill a particular role. So the jobs are there, but sometimes you don't find the people to kind of fit into the jobs. And so the question is why? One of the things I've observed with applicants, like I would say, people, job seekers in Nigeria, is that one, they have a mindset that needs to change to start with. Once they start believing that they're really not going to get the jobs, they really won't get it. That's one. People are doing stuff all around, even though yes, people have different experiences, but the reality is people have to learn to start small. So they get a job or they are being offered a particular job, and then they have this attitude that, oh, I can't take that job because it's not paying this much. So the issue of value of work is not very clear to a lot of young people. That's what I've seen. Because if it's clear, then they would start with whatever they find.
I've been hiring for as long as I can remember, for a long time now. And one of the things that I can say that is a challenge that we face is that, a lot of times people say there are no jobs and, you're just searching, these people won't call you. But the truth of the matter is that people really employable. So when I place an ad for a role, I usually get a ton of CVs. But by the time you screen those CVs, you actually don't see what you're looking for. Organizations don't hire people just because they want to pay salaries. Organizations hire people, because of value. They're looking for value addition. So I'll start with something as little as CV writing. It's very important for people to invest in CV writing, or even if you can't pay for someone to write your CV for you, you can ask a HR professional to take a look at your CV for you. Because the truth of the matter is that I meet with your CV before I meet with you. I decide if I want to have a chat or a conversation with you based on what I see on your CV.
On the profile interview segment this week, I will be speaking with the CEO of Jobberman, Hilda Krager. She tells me that there is a skill gap in the labor market. Take a listen. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
A lot is happening in the job space, and we know that we have so many youths that are actually unemployed or underemployed. Can you tell us why do you think the most populous African nation, Nigeria, actually still have many jobless youths?
Yeah. So there's many things, right? It's not possible to tie it down to one. First of all, you said it, the most populous nation. Even solutions that could work for many countries might not work for Nigeria because we're dealing with large numbers, right? So there's that. Then there's also structural issues like what is people learning in school? When somebody graduates, are they actually ready for work? Because, we see that people with first-class degrees still struggle to find work simply because there's a disconnect between what's being taught in school and what the market needs. And then the third thing I would say is something around transparency. If you look at Nigeria today, less than 30% of the roles are fulfilled in a transparent manner. And this is using online as a proxy for transparency, put in a place where everybody can see them and apply to them. What does this mean? This means that I might be the best person for the job, but I never even get to see the advert. People are happy to hire their niece or their cousin or their neighbor's child as opposed to getting the really right person for the right job. So we have unemployment, we have underemployment, but we also have low productivity that comes from the right people not being in the right jobs. Everybody knows the doctor that's now a DJ because that's what they'd rather do. And we have very many of those in society, which just overall reduces the productivity of the country.
When talking about structural problems, many economists are actually of the view that there are some policies that actually have to be in place to ensure that we have more jobs in the market space. What do you think can be done in terms of getting some of those policies right?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, one of the things we need to do as a country and eventually as a continent is to actually conduct a data-driven skills gap analysis to understand what are the things businesses struggle with, what are the talents or the skills that businesses require but job seekers don't have. Once we know that, then we know what's supposed to go into training, into curriculums. How do you plan? How do you make sure that everything in the education system is custom made and is rightly designed to enter the workplace? That's one thing. The other thing that I would encourage everybody to think about is let's stop thinking about solving this problem only through employment, right? We're living in an age now where if you look at all the data around millennials, all the data around Generation Z, there is a gig economy. They're about dignified work. They don't necessarily want a 9-to-5 getting in, reporting to a boss every day. They want opportunities to work, to develop themselves, but in different forms. So we need to start thinking beyond how do we get employment for everyone and start thinking how do we get everyone in dignified work? How do you define that? If I'm a photographer, for example, most likely I'm not looking to be sitting in an office and doing photography every day. I'm happy to have a gig this week, maybe no gig next week, and a gig the other week. And that should be acceptable. We need to make it okay for people to do work that's not traditionally defined as jobs.
So from your experience as the managing director of Jobberman, would you say there are some applications that you actually see or you actually have on a day-to-day basis and probably you don't get people to fill them up? Can you share your story?
So we do. It's interesting because we have, of course, lots of oversubscribed jobs, things like accounting, things like HR, they're oversubscribed, but we also have roles, like especially in the tech sector, people, for example, coders that do JavaScript. those roles sometimes remain empty for 6 months. And the reason is not because maybe there's no software developers in Nigeria, it's because whatever they're studying is not what the employer wants. And if your skill set is not an exact fit for my job, then it's not going to work out. Even if I brought you on board, you won't be the most productive person. I need the right fit. And what we find is that there's certain areas, and it's not just tech, even things like catering, you know, in the hospitality space, we struggle to fill those roles because I guess historically they've not been taught in school, or it's not part of the mainstream curriculum, and there's not been a lot of investment made there. I believe we're taking strides as a country, especially in the tech space, but there's so many other fields as well where we have jobs that we struggle to fulfill. But when young people are thinking about work and study and education, it's not top of mind that let me study this. For example, let me study catering, let me be a chef. It's not top of mind for the average Nigerian, and yet it's actually a very, very highly demanded skill set.
Okay, off camera, I remember we were discussing about an ice cream technician and how you couldn't fill up that space. What do you think probably the government can do in terms of probably ensuring that we have more interesting and if I may say, courses to study in school?
So I think it goes back to what I said initially, right? We need to conduct a data-driven skills gap analysis. We need to know once and for all what, and there's going to be at least 3 categories, right? There's going to be the skills we don't have at all, and we need to think through how do you create a curriculum for this, how do you encourage people to study this. There's going to be the areas where the skills are either not matched in the sense that we have the capabilities, but they're not the right fit for business needs, and we need to think through how do we tweak curriculums or how do we tweak training to make sure that people studying this, and an example is accounting, right? However well you do accounting, you're never going to go far if you don't do ACCA or ICANN. Why don't we integrate part of that curriculum into university so that already when you graduate, you're like halfway into your ICANN certification, things like that. That's a mismatch. Then there's things where the skill exists, it's just really, really rare, and that's like in tech software. How do you encourage mass upskilling in these areas to make sure that that supply can meet demand at every single given time? But the starting point, especially for government, I think would be to be data-driven around what are the actual skills gaps in the society today, and once we have a clear picture about it, then how do we now backward engineer our education and our learning and our coaching to get people to meet that need?
From research, it's said that the private sector is actually what is needed to actually reduce the unemployment rate in the country, and some actually say we need the private sector to be 10-15 times larger than what we have right now. Looking at what is tenable in other developed country and also underdeveloped country, what do you think are the solutions to ensure that we have the organized private sector actually well driven and probably the environment more conducive for doing business? Yeah,
so again, that's a very, very big question, right? Because you're trying to say, how do we encourage the private sector how do you encourage business overall in the private sector? And of course, when you look at the structural challenges we face, there's so many things like, we'll never build so many factories if we don't have stable electricity, right? We'll never have a completely productive set of employers if we don't have good healthcare, because people get sick often. So there's so much around having a social fabric that would help. But there's also things that can encourage the private sector to employ more, to hire more. And I'll give you an example. I'm not sure if other countries have done this, but in Tanzania, every business above a certain size has to take in interns, and has to take in not one intern, but like 20 interns a year, right? Which already encourages them to be hiring new talent every single year, bringing young people into the workplace every single year, and it's mandatory. But the other thing about the private sector is we have to stop thinking of private sector as big companies. An SME that hires 2 people, 3 people, that's actually the majority of the private sector. So the question is, how do we encourage those people? How do we unlock opportunities for SMEs to grow? How do we help them get access to financing? How do we help them have the right business processes? And that's something, even at Jobberman, that we think about a lot, because we've got a database of over 60,000 employers, and we get random requests like, guys, can you help me handle my payroll? I don't know how to do it. Can you help me handle my payments? I'm trying to hire this person. We have to figure out a way to help SMEs be sustainable. They say right now over I think 90% of SMEs don't make it to 5 years. How do we change that statistic? Because the private sector, honestly speaking, is built of those. We have the big companies and they have a role to play, but the small SME, that's what's contributing to most of the private sector hiring. So we need to find a way to empower those small companies and make sure they can be sustainable, they can hire more people, they can grow, eventually stop being SMEs,
Well, from my experience when I was talking to some unemployed youth, fine, we can say that they are unemployed, but we don't have much companies to actually even fill up the number of people that are actually looking for this job. And during the conference that was held recently, it was actually observed that we don't have companies that actually outlive probably the originator of the ideas. So what do you think can be done to actually ensure that people actually have the idea and probably it's actually sustained? We know we have quite a number, but it can be better because the population is actually increasing on a daily basis. So what do you think are the solutions to this?
So I hear two things, right? The first one I think we talked about was around even if all the companies were there, we still have so many young people that we can't absorb everybody. For that, that's why it brings back to my thing around dignified work. Not everybody must be employed, right? Some people are happy with an e-commerce 101 course and they'll open up a shop on Instagram that will be very, very successful and they'll grow, make even more money than they would have made in a workplace. We need to encourage that. Young people can be entrepreneurs. We need to tell the 19-year-old who has a camera and a dream, go out and start taking pictures. Eventually you'll earn revenue. There's no need for you to hold yourself back. We have to encourage young people at whatever age, if you've got the mindset for it and the right capabilities, to go out and start businesses. And then provide the right kind of framework for that. On the point of sustainability, I think there's two things. One is one falls on the founder of the business, which is you have to build processes that don't depend on you for success. You have to empower your company secretary, empower your HR, your accountants. You need to know that if something happened to you tomorrow, your business can survive. It's a huge challenge because the way our businesses work, lots of businesses work in Africa today, it's almost like a chiefdom, where the head, the MD or the CEO is basically, the chairman. He is a boss. His word is law, and everything is happening. MD. Everything is happening in his head, but there's no systems and processes. He has to approve everything, and that's dangerous for business because there's no continuity in place. There's no succession planning. So there's a lot to be said around for businesses that want to be sustainable. What's your succession planning strategy like? When you think look at all the top people you have in your organization. If one of these people could not come to work tomorrow for a particular reason, what happens? Because that's how you begin to test the sustainability of your business.
Okay, looking at harnessing young talent, can you tell us how Jobaman has actually been able to actually harness talent across Nigeria and Africa? What are your observations and what are your findings?
One of the things we noticed early on is that the quality of job seekers, the job seekers' quality can be improved if we invest in training. So Jobaman originally started as a job board, post jobs and hire, just very simple. But we've had to kind of backward integrate into the upskilling part, which is very important for youth because you actually graduate without, and I'll give an example of this. There's no public university in Nigeria today that has a career center. Right? Which means you go through university, there's actually nobody guiding you, counseling you on how to build a career, nobody necessarily teaching you how to do simple things like a CV or interview preparation, or even teaching the basics of life. How do you move from the classroom you are today to the boardroom? What's your route to success in the workplace or in employment? How do you even dress up to go to work? The basics, how do you present yourself? Business writing, all these skills that an employer assumes you should come to work having. You actually don't, and it could be the job seeker's fault in a sense because sometimes you have to be proactive, but then for the most part it's not because it's not been inbuilt into our higher education system. It's not something that's been shown as a priority for young students.
So from your findings and years of experience trying to get talent into the workplace, would you say that there are jobs but they are not enough qualified persons to fill up this position?
No, that would be a bit deceptive. There are some jobs where there's not enough qualified people to fill those positions, but there are others where the jobs are just not enough. And that's why, when you look at traditional African society and mindsets, parents want engineers, they want doctors, they want accountants, they want lawyers. But those fields are oversubscribed. The question is, what does it take to convince the traditional African parent that it's okay to study music, it's okay to study photography, it's okay to study catering because there's jobs there? That's the conversation we have to have because, again, it's just a mismatch. In some areas, oversubscribed, other areas, you struggle.
So finally, you're saying that it starts from the home and there's a lot to be done in terms of ensuring that both the parents, the school system actually have this environment that would actually thrive in the workplace overall.
Yeah.
It was an interesting conversation I had with you.
Same here. Thank you so much.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember, labor creates wealth.